In addition to inserting audio and video multimedia clips into your Acrobat PDF files, Acrobat also has the capability to support inserting certain kinds of 3D files with live 3D interactivity. We're going to review that in this video. In order to use 3D objects within Acrobat, they must be in one of two formats: U3D, which is the Universal 3D format, or PRC, which is Product Representation Compact, a compressed format that's compatible with some CAD programs. We had the ability to create U3D files from within Photoshop CS5, but with the latest version of Photoshop CS6, Adobe has removed the plugin. With the 3D layer selected, we should be able to go to the 3D menu and select Export 3D Layer. When we export the layer, we want to change from the default format of Collada to U3D. And again, in CS6, that plugin is no longer available. So you'll need to roll back to CS6 version 13.0 or use CS5 if you want to create your own U3D files. In the meanwhile, we'll have to wait to see what Adobe does to rectify this situation. We can bring in 3D objects created in other programs, and there are many available for free on the web, such as this trammel, which actually comes to us from archibaseplanet.com. This file was provided as a 3ds model, which was loaded into Photoshop CS5 and exported as a U3D for use in Acrobat. Let's go back to Acrobat and get started. We'll close this file, and we'll start by creating a blank document. In the Tools pane, open the Pages category, and we'll choose More Insert Options, and we'll choose Insert Blank Page. This gives us a blank slate to work on for our 3D model. If we look in the Interactive Objects panel, we have our multimedia tools. We looked at video, sound, and SWF in a previous movie, and now we're going to look at adding 3D multimedia. When we click this tool, we get the same crosshair cursor that we saw for other types of multimedia, and we can drag out a rectangle to define the area where we want our 3D model to appear. Next, we get the Insert 3D dialog, and it's asking us to select a file. We'll click on Browse and go to the Working Files in the Chapter 5 folder, and here are some U3D files that we've provided within the Working Files. We'll choose Trammel 3D and click on Open. Now we have the checkbox here, as we saw in previous multimedia videos, to show advanced options. We'll click on this, and we see that the launch settings are similar to what we saw in the earlier videos on multimedia. And if you need a refresher, please go back and watch the previous video for more detail about these options. There's a 3D tab here that we'll come back to in just a moment. For now, we'll just go ahead and click OK to select the default options and get our 3D model into the document. Once it's loaded, we can see that it resembles a video clip in some fashions. When we have the hand tool active and we hover over it, the cursor changes to the pointing finger and we get the tooltip Click to activate. When we click, we get a toolbar that appears over the model, and this is the 3D toolbar. At the moment, the default tool is set to the 3D Rotate tool, and if we click and drag on our object, we can actually rotate this object live in 3D space, as you see right here within this PDF document. We have other 3D movement tools available from this drop-down list. For example, we can spin, pan, and zoom, and so forth. We'll switch to the Zoom tool, and we'll bring this view in a little bit closer. And then we'll switch to the Pan tool and move this over just a bit. As you can see, there's quite a bit of detail in this model. We can click the Home button, which brings us back to the default view. Now we'll switch back to the Rotate tool, and we'll spin this around to a better view, one that's a little more friendly for a starting view here. We may want this to become the default view, since this is a better angle than the initial view that we saw. So let's go here to this drop-down list, and we'll save this view by choosing Manage Views. We'll create a new view, and we'll click on OK here, and we'll change the name of this new view to My View, and then we'll click Rename. Now we have a view called My View. We'll click OK, and anytime we rotate this object around, we can choose My View from the drop-down list and return it to its original position. Now we have some additional options here. We can change from the default of showing this object in its solid view to many other options. For example, wireframe, which shows the 3D mesh structure. We have many options for the rendering style, but we'll change this back to solid, which provides a more photorealistic view. We have options for lighting as well. We can use the default lights available within the 3D models file, or we can change the lights to a variety of different preset arrangements. For example, daylights. These lights would override the lights in the 3D file. We'll leave this set to the lights from file for the time being. Now notice the gray background. Perhaps we don't want this. We can change to any color by clicking this drop-down. Perhaps we'll choose white. Now we can view our object as we see it on a white background, as if it was right here on the page. We can right-click or control-click on a Mac, and from the context menu we can choose Disable Content. As with audio and video, this resets the object to its original state before we clicked on it, including the default poster view. The image as we changed it a moment ago is gone, and we're back to where we started. We can make some changes to update this by using the Select Object tool. With the Select Object tool, we can double-click on the 3D object to bring up the Edit 3D panel. We'll look now at the 3D tab. Within the 3D tab, we can see right away that we have the ability to change the default background color, and this is where the gray color is coming from. We'll go ahead and change this to white. We can change the lighting scheme as well here to create a new default view, but again, we'll leave this set to lights from file. We can also change the default rendering style to any of the available choices as we saw a moment ago. And again, we'll leave this set to solid in our example. Now let's add a default view. If we select Manage Views, we can see the new view that we created when we were interacting with the model. We can select this and choose Use as Default and click OK. We'll check to add the default views to the file, and we'll leave everything else the same. We'll go back to the launch settings and notice that the poster image is set to keep the current poster. If we leave this as is, we'll see the same poster image that we already have in the file. It won't be updated with our new defaults, and the new defaults will only be visible when we click to activate the object. But if we check Retrieve Poster from Default View, this will generate a new poster image for this file based on the new default view and the background color that we just set on the other tab. We'll click OK, and after a moment it will update and we'll see the new default appear. We can switch back to the Hand tool, and we can work with this model as before. We've talked about this 3D toolbar, but it's possible to avoid having the toolbar appear over our 3D object. If this is too much detail and you don't want to confuse the user, we can actually make a change to this to prevent the toolbar from appearing. Once again, we'll use the Select Object tool, and we'll double-click on the 3D object to bring up the Edit 3D panel. We'll choose the 3D tab, and here's the option to Show Toolbar. We can deselect this and then click OK, and the toolbar will no longer be available when the 3D model is active. We'll switch to the Hand tool once again, hover over the 3D object, and click to activate. When we click, notice that we have no toolbar. However, we can still click and drag this object, and the Rotate tool is still the default tool. In fact, we can right-click on Windows or Control-click on a Mac, and within the context menu here, we have the ability to switch tools. So if we wanted to switch to the Zoom tool, we can zoom in, and then we can switch once again to the Pan tool and pan around. We can switch again back to the Rotate tool and rotate this some more. The context menu also allows you to access your views, your rendering options, your lighting, and so forth. So the tools are still available, but the toolbar is not showing and it's not obvious. So if you prefer not to have the toolbar showing, you can change it this way. In fact, You can even view this 3D object in a floating window, and when you do, you have the capability to work within the floating window while your document is showing the default view below. We'll click to close that. Finally, let's take a look at the 3D preferences. We can access the preferences directly from the context menu of the 3D object, or by choosing Edit, and then choosing Preferences, and that would be Acrobat Preferences on a Mac, and then selecting the 3D and Multimedia category. Here we have a lot of options controlling how 3D is displayed. If you work a lot with 3D, you may want to break out the help file and study these closely, but we'll look at a few key items that may be of interest. For the preferred renderer, you can select from DirectX or Software. The software option is slower, but overall may provide a rendering result closer to the original application from which the 3D file was generated. The DirectX option will be faster. Enable selections for the hand tool will allow you to select and highlight parts of the 3D model with the hand tool. With this deselected, you can still select 3D objects with the Select Object tool. Show the 3D orientation axis displays the little XYZ axis in the lower left corner of the 3D model view. It's on by default, but you can always turn it off if you want to. Remember, these options within this dialog box are specific to the installed version of Acrobat on a given machine. They are not part of the saved document.